We have a call from a woman whose child is trans, and she wants to talk to us about the experience from the perspective of a parent. Yeah. So let's do that. Lisa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Lisa, you're on the air with Callie, Wright, Kendall Hopkins, and Clare Wuellner.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
Hi, Kendall. I wasn't going to call in because I never have, but this subject just hit me right in my heart, and listening to Callie kind of said everything I wanted to say, but
it
my
bears
son
repeating.
Is trans. Yes, my son is trans, and just to put it in a nutshell, I think the most important thing for a parent is just to treat your child as your child, not as my child who is trans. Because they need to have a place that's home and not to be the weird, quote unquote, weird person out there, different person, because they're not. That's just your child. So for me, I have never been able to grasp why parents make it about themselves. I mean, I do understand when the process was first starting. Of course, that was from birth. But I mean, when I was aware of the process starting, my only concern was, is my child going to be a different person? Am I going to lose my child? That's how I felt at first. So that's the only negative I've ever had in the whole situation. But, once I realized, okay, that's just like my child changed clothes. It's kind of how I look at it. It's the same person. So other than that, it hasn't really affected me at all. I wouldn't let it, and I won't let it. But I think it's just really important to be as normal as you can and don't make every conversation about gender, because they get enough of that. Your kid's going to get enough of that just being out in society. And whether people have good intentions or not, you're always under a microscope. So for me, I want my son to come home and just be my son. I don't want him to have to deal with being, an object of conversation, because he's not.
Yeah.
So that's my advice to parents is, keep your mouth shut. If you don't understand something, there are groups to go to, there are people to ask, but don't put your kids under a microscope. Just love them and be there for them. And that's just your child. So that would be my advice, just to be a safe place for someone who doesn't have a safe place.
I have a question for you. I'm sorry.
Great advice.
Yeah.
Saying great advice.
Yeah. So, Lisa, parents worry. And then if your child is non-normative in any sense, whether it be autism or transgender, or it doesn't matter what it is, you worry more. So can you address that?
Yes, there is a worry. I think it's much easier for women or girls becoming male on the outside, just because it's, for some reason, it's more acceptable or easier to make that transition, because the testosterone changes your voice. Automatically you cut your hair. Like, you're not as obviously trans as a lot of men who transition into women. So number one, my child had the advantage, if you could call it that, of at least looking more male than maybe my a child being born male transgendering into being a female. I think would have a lot more problems in society. And we're very fortunate that I live in California, which is a very liberal state, and my son went to college in San Francisco, which to me was a blessing, because there are so many different people there, so many different genders of people, or people who identify in different ways are more accepted there. So that was a blessing. So I don't have the experience of living in the Midwest or in the South, which I'm sure would be horrendous. But even so, yes, of course, you worry. And it's not even just about, physical abuse. It's just, I worried about, and still do, about my son's mental state of health. And like, for example, for his 18th birthday, we went on his 18th birthday and had his top surgery done. That was my present to him for his 18th birthday. And while we were there, he was so excited. He started he had already started his hormones and all of that. But when we sat down with the doctor told him, you can never, once you've committed to this, like, if you want to ever have biological children, you have to donate eggs now, because you probably won't be able to. So that was such a blow that instead of being such a great celebratory day, all the way home, he's in hysterics crying.
Oh.
Because I'm not rich. Like, we don't have the money. It's not covered by any insurance as far as saving your eggs. And I know we shouldn't care because you can always adopt, and children are children, right? But it was a blow. I mean, people don't understand or empathize with the issues that trans people have to deal with. And it's not always, like I said, of course it's fear of being killed or fear of being beaten up or ostracized, but it's things like that. Or just normal dating situations are way more explosive, way more intense or scary for a trans person. Just being young, I remember, having a crush on somebody and hoping they would like me, or being insecure about, being in a sexual situation, how will they look at me? But put that times 100 when I'm thinking about my child having, to like somebody and just to get them to accept who he is, and then get over the hurdle of the sexual situation and all of that. So I think there's just so much to worry about. And yes, I feel all of that for my child. But I just want to make sure, I keep a very close gauge on trying to, and I know you can't really, but to see, is he having a down period? If so, should I spend more time around him? Just that kind of thing, because there's so much suicide and depression issues and things of that caused by not who they are, but how people treat them. So, yeah, of course I worry. It's a big worry, but overall, he's such a blessing to me that I don't consider it a hardship on me. It's not about me. But I just think parents should be sensitive of what their child is going through. It's not just the outward appearance. It's a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I think it's, it's got to be so hard because I feel like, you want, obviously, like, you want your kid to know, like, all of the joy that's possible in life. And so I mean, I think the idea of, making things normal is important. But I also think it's really important to understand that, like, in the grand scheme of things, being trans is not normal. And there's, and I don't mean not normal as in not okay. I mean, not normal as in it's not a common thing to be. And,
right.
And so that's the constant struggle that I have is, like, there are so many times where I'm like, yes, I just want you to treat me like any other person on the street. But, like, the reality is I have a vastly different life experience than a lot of people do. And that colors very much the way that I navigate society and my friend groups and my job situations and all of that stuff. And so it's like, why can't we just treat everybody like human beings? And it's like, if I go to a doctor and my doctor refuses to prescribe me hormones because I'm trans, me saying, well, why don't you just treat me like a human? That's not an argument, right? Like, me being trans is the specific reason that I'm being treated differently. And it's important to call those things out and call those things what they are and be very specific and real about what that is. But you also do want to create that, like, you're not my trans kid, you're just my kid. And I imagine as a parent, that's got to be such a hard thing, like a hard line to walk.
Yeah, well, at first, my biggest thing, honestly, was the pronouns.
Sure.
Yeah, because I felt like I probably overreacted myself, but every time I said she instead of he, I felt like I was, poking him with a knife, because I'm way oversensitive because you love your kids so much that you don't want to do anything to cause them pain. But yeah, you got to be real. You're exactly right. And you also have to let them know that it's okay if that's what they want to talk about. I just don't really bring it up unless, we're watching something on TV or he says something or, but yeah, your perspective is exactly right. It's not normal in society. And I could just tell by questions that people ask me, like at work. It's a lot of veiled criticism that people try to portray as curiosity.
Oh, yeah.
You know exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
So, and on top of that, we laugh because my children are biracial as well and atheist. So they're like, okay, we're everything you can hate. Here we are.
Right.
But so I get the questions from people saying, I don't understand why black people ... or I don't understand why trans people have to ... And my answer is always, well, what have you done to understand? What have you researched? Who have you asked? Or, and then of course a silence on the other end, because that's not really what they're saying. So it's
Right.
very insidious, even from people who supposedly are understanding or who are your friends, or, or it's always like, they act like I'm some kind of a hero because I accepted my child. And to me, that I get it, but it's always like, well, I understand, because like if my kid had no legs, I would be there for them. Or if my kid, even if they murdered someone, I would be there for them. And I'm like, geez, my kid's a murderer now. So, it's very insulting, and I try not to have an attitude because I'm trying to be there as an example and to educate people. I mean, that's what I do just on a daily basis. I'm very proud of my children, both of them, and of the transition and how good he looks, and, how he's doing well in life. And so I'm very open about it. And I feel like that's going to be more of an impact on people than getting upset and yelling at them, which is really hard for me not to do because I have a very bad temper. But I just think them knowing someone who is trans or who has a trans child, who has an absolutely normal life, helps people to accept more so than being on a soapbox. So that's what I try to do on a daily basis is, people ask questions as offensive as I might find them, I'm going to answer them. But I also put them in check and let them know my kid is not diseased. My kid is not a murderer. My kid, it is just a kid who's dealing with an issue that's not very common. So,
and it's so hard to deal with
there's
because...
a lot involved. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
No,
not
you're okay.
the conversation.
I was just like, so there's this really annoying double standard in the conversation around trans issues, in that like trans folks are expected to be infinitely patient, and by extension, folks who ally themselves with trans folks. So parents of trans kids, partners of trans people, all of that sort of stuff. Because we are the question mark, right? We are the mystery. We're the ones who are supposed to be infinitely patient, regardless of how invasive the questions get, regardless of how personal and deep the questions get, regardless of how we say like, yeah, I'm not really wanting to have this conversation right now. It's the onus is on us to be infinitely patient, infinitely giving, and regardless of how intrusive and pushy people get. But the other side of that conversation is not, they're not as obligated to be infinitely patient with us. So, for example, I feel like, when my best friend tells me, gosh, I've known you for 18 years, this is going to take some getting used to, and I'm probably going to screw some things up along the way. I feel like that's a reasonable thing, right? Like, yes, you have known me for a very long time as one thing, and I'm now asking you to call me a different name and use different pronouns, and I'm going to look way different and all of that sort of stuff. And me asking you to get used to that, I mean, that's an ask, right? That's an adjustment that you're going to have to make. Now, and so I'm willing to give those folks grace, right? But thankfully not in any of my relationships, but something that I hear a lot is that the same grace is not afforded in the other direction. So like the 15th time you misgender me today, I'm allowed to be annoyed by that. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that like, you like punch me in the face when you did it. But like, just like it's okay for you to ask for some grace in your mistakes. It's also okay for me to ask for a little grace when I get impatient with how pushy you are, or when I get, when I get impatient with you misgendering me for the third or fourth time today, and I have to have this conversation over and over and over again. It's seen as unreasonable for me to ask that of other people, whereas people are seen as reasonable to ask infinitely of me to give that, and it's very, very frustrating. So solidarity in the struggle there.
Time too is anytime like a trans person will get upset, like you said, you could have gone the whole day just being misgendered all day long or being asked stupid questions, and you've been patient all the way up till this point, and then as soon as you find that person who does break you a little and makes you go, you know what, just shut up or whatever you say, all of a sudden they go, well, you're losing allies by treating me this way. And that is one of the, oh my God, I can't explain to you how angry that makes me in my heart. Because if you were an ally, it wouldn't matter how a trans person treated you. You care about their rights because they're human rights and they deserve to have them.
Mm-hmm.
I love you, Kendall.
That's exactly right. And do you want to trade positions? You know what I'm saying? To have to deal with people, like you said, just simple things like using the wrong pronoun over and over and over. I went through that with his dad. And it's just, to me, even if it's not intentional, if they don't think it's intentional, the point of not caring enough to try right there just tells me you're not as tolerant as you say you are. Yeah. You're not, just not being conscious of it. And I totally get it. You're not a saint. You're a human being. Just like everybody else. And it's very frustrating. It's very annoying.
Annoying sounds like an understatement.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. People talk about, getting offended. Nobody should be offended. Oh, yeah. That's offensive. It's offensive.
Yeah, that's that whole thing just, well, and I think, I try not to use the word offense anyways, because I use the word hurt, because that's really what we're talking about. When you misgender me, it doesn't offend me, it hurts me. And I think those are different things.
Yeah.
I agree. Said. Yeah.
Right on. Anything else you want to add, Lisa?
No, I think I've probably said way too much already.
No, Lisa, you have been fabulous. I am so glad you called. This has been wonderful.
It's just been wonderful to hear you, and because just to hear from someone's perspective who is there, who's going through it. And you're doing a wonderful thing, and I just wish you the best. I really do. And I'm so proud, even though I don't know you personally, so proud of you and what you've gone through and how positive you are. Will make a huge difference in other people's lives, and you should be, really commended for that.
Yeah.
Gosh, thank you so much.
You're so wonderful, Lisa.
Yeah. Will you be my mom?
Yeah.
Are you my mother?
I will.
Yeah. Thank you. And
I'm Kendall's one of her Facebook moms.
Oh, right on.
Yes, she is.
Yeah.
Love it.
I have a mom that's not my biological mom, so I get that. She's the one I hear in my head rather than the biological one. So I want just one more thing, Lisa, before you go. If you haven't listened to the Atheist Manifesto, do. It's an amazing podcast. Callie is just...
It is wonderful.
It is
and
the best.
Can I just add that, Callie's voice could just put me to sleep because it's so just... There's something about your voice.
It's so
lovely.
Aww, that's exciting.
And calming and you were made for radio.
That's super validating because I've worked really hard on that. So thank you.
I love your voice.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey. Kendall keeping it real over there with the baby.
Yep.
I'm crazy. You guys don't even know.
Well, I know. It's been a while, but I do remember. I never had to be on a TV show with it, but
You've probably been seeing me giving him dagger eyes the whole time.
I have seen the mom look. I've seen the mom look, and I know. I feel it.
Trained head was like...
Yes.
I know. I am putting my face on camera to be like, you better stop it right now.
Yeah. Listen. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes. So identify.